There, Liz.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hi. Good. Great to see you.
Yeah, and you?
How are you
Thank you for having me
feeling?
back.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm alright. I'm trying to get through the next half an hour without using the toilet.
Mm.
And I'm pregnant, by the way.
I did want. You told us, but it's your news to talk about, and you look absolutely lovely. So I'm very
You know
excited
what?
to
I
see you.
never put on makeup anymore. I think I get a bit carried away with anything I put on makeup for. I got a bit carried away.
Okay, so we're creating a movement here. For those that have never heard of you, Liz, would you mind introducing yourself? Tell us the movement that you plan to inspire millions of people to take action.
Yeah, sure. So the movement is called the Consumer-Led Movement, and you can find it at consumerledmovement.com, and you can take the pledge to join there as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the aims of the movement and try and get people interested and hopefully to sign up today and obviously have a conversation with you guys. But yeah, it was really interesting listening to what those last guys are saying. A lot of the things of what I want to talk about as well, obviously coming together, what we can do as individuals, but how we can bring that together to have, a bigger impact on a wider scale. And the focus on health and well-being, I think that's a really important part of this movement as well. I suppose going straight into it, those are a couple of the key aims. So the first one is improve our well-being. That is a really important part of it, and how by reducing our carbon footprint we can improve our well-being at the same time. How we can decrease our personal emissions, and if we do that collectively, we can have the biggest impact. And thirdly, and importantly, it's about tackling the root cause, as I see it, of climate change. And such a huge part of that is consumerism, and how we can tackle that as part of this movement by moving away from mindless consumerism and towards something much more mindful and sustainable. And how by doing that we can create some systemic change, we can create culture change, and policy follows culture change. So actually we can build a kind of more fair and green economy, a more creative economy of tomorrow by coming together and choosing how we spend our money more carefully, becoming conscious consumers.
So Gary, you and I have talked about this quite a lot before, the role of the individual and what can be done. And for me, it's absolutely critical importance of the role of the individual in all of this, because at the end of the day, it's us who's actually buying stuff. So what do you think, Gary? What's your take on it? You're a consumer as well.
I am a consumer. I'm a business owner. I'm a father. I have many reasons to want to engage. This topic. You've taught me, Charles, to really understand and consume the information and read it. When something comes on the news, I don't just switch off. I become very present to it. And I think that this is the challenge, really. Whoever you are, whatever you are, and I seem to find a disconnect that people just disengage in the content. So something's on the news. Plastics in the water, people not being careful, and they're not present to that message, and that's why I love what Liz is trying to do, because Liz is really trying to empower people to make the difference. So Liz, I love what you do, and I love the message that you take along.
So Liz, we had a question come up on the Clubhouse that we've had beforehand. Apologies, Liz, that you're on the wrong type of phone to get onto Clubhouse.
It's coming.
We had a lovely guy who came up on Clubhouse, and the first question he asked was really, what practical steps could individuals take? So, what's your answer to that question, Liz, about what practical steps individuals can take on global warming?
So there are 4 key areas of our lifestyles. So it really depends on us personally, and this is why I suggest as part of the movement you go on and you measure your own carbon footprint and you see where you're at and you see where your lifestyle is having the biggest impact on emissions, because it will be different for everybody. But there are 4 key areas, and they are around what we eat, which I know we've spoken about a lot, around our transport choices, around our energy use at home, and really critically as well around the consumer products that we buy. And actually consumers, according to the research that I've been using, are responsible for 60% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And that's if you take on board, the responsibility as a consumer for the stuff that you're buying. So you don't put it on China for manufacturing it, you put it on yourself for buying it. Then actually, 60% of global greenhouse emissions. It just shows you the amount of power actually that we have to reduce emissions if we do collectively make lifestyle changes. So there are sort of 4 categories. I would suggest go and use carbon footprint calculator. The one that I've been using is at footprintcalculator.org, and that will give you quite a lot of questions. It only takes a few minutes, but it'll give you quite a lot of questions about your lifestyle, so you can see where you're having the biggest impact. Are you a high meat eater? Do you fly a lot? Those kind of questions, and you'll then see how much carbon you're producing by doing those things.
Tell us about your favourite area. I think I know where it might be, but which one of these areas that you mentioned? Let's start with your favourite area that you're using.
I suppose consumer products does interest me the most, because I think that's where we hold the most power to create culture change. Because businesses have to adapt or die, they have to adapt or die, that's how they work. So if we collectively say, do you know what, we're just going to stop buying stuff we don't need actually, we're going to stop buying stuff that doesn't add real value to our lives, and instead we're going to choose to spend our money really consciously, we have so much power to create culture change there. Because business have to adapt or die, and governments are seemingly subservient to big business in our society as well. So the consumer holds so much power, and as well as creating culture change, to move away from consumerism really can impact our well-being quite strongly, because materialism, we know common sense tells us materialism and buying more and more and more doesn't actually fulfill us and make us happy, and actually the research backs that up, that it creates depression, anxiety, bad relationships, all this kind of stuff comes from focusing on buying stuff and spending too much time doing that, and actually we could be spending more time doing things that would really fulfill us, and the things that are more creative. So instead of buying new clothes, can you rejuvenate your old wardrobe? Same with furniture, same with decorating the house. I'm going to upcycle my kitchen soon when I get the time, and things like that just give you the opportunity.
Hey Gary, is that an opportunity for you? Is there a kitchen available, did you say, Liz?
Say again?
Did you say you've got a kitchen available to someone else? Is that what you're saying?
No, we're gonna change it. We're gonna spray the doors, and we're gonna do something fun with that. That's what Liz is saying.
Just explain to people, what do you mean by upcycle, Liz?
Exactly what Gary said. So paint cupboards, and obviously you can be as creative as you want depending on you. And there are businesses starting to spring up now that will do that for you if you prefer to get somebody in. I think there's a massive opportunity for businesses like that, right? Why chuck out a whole kitchen when actually half of it's probably completely fine, just needs a lick of paint and a bit of creative flair. And that's what I mean, we can create a more creative.
The one-use society, really, how do we get rid of that? Because people, they buy inexpensive clothes and then use them once and then throw them away. I really would love to reach them or get to understand what they're thinking. Do you understand? Do you understand them, Liz?
I get it. It's this mindset that we've created for ourselves, a system that we live in. This is how we created it, and I say that sort of the root cause, we've got ourselves stuck in this trap now because it's driven by GDP, as Ian was talking about, and the growth. Wanting more and more and more. It filters down to buying more and more stuff. We've got ourselves kind of trapped in this mindset, and that keeps us trapped in the sort of monkey brain of wanting more and looking after number one, and not the higher thinking brain of actually, we want a well-being society. We don't want a more society. I completely lost my pregnancy brain.
Being sympathetic to the situation. I don't know if you know this, Liz. You probably do. When you go to a takeaway, the little plastic things that the ketchup is in. Apparently, it's one of the worst plastics recycle. So I just don't ask for those things anymore. And that
Yeah.
empowering, being consumer, they will listen. If you keep saying I don't want that anymore, there will be no need for the market.
Yeah, exactly. And let's take the initiative. Let's take the initiative to say, no, I don't want to store in my drink. It's hard because I've done it myself so many times. I've forgotten. I forgot to say I don't want to store in my drink, and they give you a straw. Yeah, they are little things, but it is a mindset change. And once you start to change your habits for the bigger things, which are going to have the real impact, it just filters down and then becomes a sort of mindset where, you're not caught up in, just buy something new. To your last question, just buy something new and chuck it away. Who cares? You're thinking differently because you're being more mindful about what you're doing with your money and how it can create the world that you want in the future.
So Liz, we've got a nice easy question for you from on the chat. We've got a question. What is your consumer-led movement website?
Consumerism.com. So hopefully that's easy for people to find. Go on there. Do you know what? This movement's brand new. It's literally brand new. And I am very much open to people, engaging with me, telling me what they think does work, doesn't work. I thought, let's get it out the door because let's get something started. I didn't want to try and make it perfect because that's one of the things I've learned in my career through problem solving techniques is that you can plan everything to the T, but actually it's not going to work in the real world. So what you do is you get the basic idea out there and then you grow it based on feedback of what works in the real world. So if anyone's listening to this and goes on and has a look and has feedback for me, I am all ears, and I know it's not perfect, and it needs people now to engage with it and tell me how to grow it and how to make it successful, how to make it benefit people the most.
Okay, so we've got you said that too fast, so let's just repeat that. What I think I heard is consumerledmovement.com.
That's the one.
Consumerledmovement.com. Okay,
Yeah.
So while we're talking about that, Liz, when people go onto their site, ideally, I'm going to come back to a minute to my favourite carbon reduction ones, and then let's get Gary in a minute as well. But before we do that, when people come to your site, Liz, what actually do you want people to do?
So I'm suggesting that we take a pledge. So for me personally, I use the carbon footprint calculator that I mentioned earlier. And it was a few years ago now when I started doing this, and I found my carbon footprint was around the UK average, around 8 tonnes, which is really too high for what we need it to be as an individual in a developed country. And I have reduced my carbon footprint down to 3 tonnes from 8 tonnes, and that's by doing a lot of the suggestions that I'm suggesting in the movement and in the book that I've written. And by using the techniques as well, that's really important because I think we just don't know how to do it and how to incorporate these changes into our busy lives. So one really key one is using continuous improvement, iterative improvement, cutting down bit by bit. It might sound like that's too slow, but actually that's the way to create lasting change that works because we are risk averse, we don't like change, that's hardwired into our brains. So actually by doing one small step at a time, it's
she's frozen.
snowballs, and that's how you build it. And that's how over the last 5 years I've made big changes, but over time it's to make it seem easy to do. So don't if you're a massive flyer, don't say I'm going to stop flying tomorrow completely. It's not going to work. You're not going to see it through. But yeah, you can cut down bit by bit and kind of bypass that fear mechanism in our brain, and it snowballs.
Okay, well, what I would say is, I'm really pleased that Liz has identified the big important areas. The ones I like actually are the ones where you're directly buying fossil fuels. So, like when you put fuel in your car, or when you buy an airline ticket, these ones. So we had we had all these calculations that we'd done, and then one of our team members, this was 2 or 3 years ago now. What they said is well, look, actually, how much CO2 emissions are there from putting petrol in the car? And I thought, well, I don't know, better do the calculation. So it led to some really, really interesting calculations. So a litre of petrol or diesel releases 2.5 kilograms of CO2, And actually, I looked it up recently, but a litre of petrol actually weighs less than 2.5 kilograms. So it's a very, very dense, very concentrated form of energy, which is why it produces more CO2 than its weight. So once you start to know that, every time you fill up your car and you put in 60 litres or whatever, then over time, before you come back to the garage, you will have burnt 60 times 2.5, you'll have burnt 150 kilograms of CO2. But the other one that I really like is the one where you actually look at ways to remove your CO2 emissions.
That's my favourite.
The great one is this is a picture behind me in Gary, which is it's about planting trees. So planting trees is not an end solution in the same way that if we all cut our CO2 emissions from cars and we move to electric cars and we use the different forms of heating at home. But what it does do, planting trees, it can remove an awful lot of CO2 emissions. It's got the potential to remove 10% of global CO2 emissions. And what's really, really important at this time, it buys us more time. It buys us time for society to adapt, make the changes required that we're all talking about. So I've put the link in the chat. So if people are interested, then you can take a look at donating to plant some trees. And you get, for £30 donation, you get 270 trees. And to put it in context, to remove the sort of the average that Liz mentioned, then you need to plant 1,750 trees, which is £187. So Gary, over to you. Of these, what's your favourite action?
Well, I removes the guilt to know that I plant trees. Number one. I teach my children, and very subtly, that overpopulation is a serious thing. I think I know they're only young, but we do talk about that. We talk about how we can walk to the shops instead of getting the car to the shops, and because that's very important to me. Apart from the basic things of, I don't buy things if I don't need them. And that's important. And trying as a dad to pull on the next generation. And fossil fuels. If I can, when I change my boiler, I'm very, very conscious of, like Charles tells us to put on a jumper instead of turn up the thermostat 2 degrees. He tells us these things. So that it's all a matter of education. And I feel great that I am not a strain on the world's resources. That at the end of the day, that makes me feel good, and that I'm helping the next generation to figure things out. If I had known quite seriously that 4 children was going to have this impact on the world, I might not have had 4. But I really didn't know in 2004 what impact overpopulation has on the world, and I didn't know in 2004 owning a diesel car would give bigger emissions. You know, these are all things that are new to me, and I'm really pleased that hopefully we will have time to curve away, and that's why I'm grateful to people like yourself, Liz and Charles, that are out there educating. Nobody is being paid. If you're watching this, nobody's being paid for this webinar. Everyone's given up their time because it's their passion. And please, if you're watching this and you think, wow, I want to get involved, there's something you can all do about that.
Yeah, so Gary, as I said at the beginning, the reason for having this webinar is because 2021 is such a critical year. This is the last year that we can limit global warming to 1.5. The world leaders are due to meet in November to discuss this. So we've still got 9 months to influence those world leaders to do the right thing and to make a commitment to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And so what we're trying to do here, like with the discussions with Liz and everybody else, we're trying to help people to understand what's going on, to help so that we know what needs to be done and we know the best thing that people can do. Now, that leads on, Liz, to a question I want to ask you about, which is that what we talked about with Ilan just a few minutes ago. We talked about the UK's made a big effort to communicate on COVID to the world. Ilan gave some great examples of maybe how that communication could have been done a little bit better. But what I'm aware of with in our area here of global warming is that the UK Climate Change Committee has said that there should be government and public communications, and yet there hasn't yet been. So there's been all sorts of announcements. There's been announcements on all sorts of things. There's been announcements on more wind power and all sorts of things. But for me, it's the government has said what they're going to do, but they haven't actually said why they're going to do it and why it's important and how people fit into this. So the question I want to ask you, Liz, is that if the government did back this, if the government did have their level communications to say people need to do something about global warming themselves, how much would a difference would it make, in your view, to the work that you and many others of us are trying to do with encouraging individuals to take action on global warming?
Yeah, sorry, my signal cut out, so I only caught the tail end of that.
Oh, let me repeat that then. So what I'm saying is that the UK Government Climate Change Committee has said that that the government should have communications, public engagement about climate change. So what I'm asking you is, if that were put in place, what difference would that make compared to now, when the communication's not been it's been very little ineffective communication?
I think it would be huge, because they'd be contacting people on a mass scale, whereas all the individual initiatives like mine obviously can only reach a certain audience, whereas if you're talking about the government, then they can reach the audience nationally and internationally. I suppose it just depends for me how the message is put across, and I think that last guys were talking about that quite a lot. It depends how the message is put across, because it would need to land in a way that inspires people to take action, not in a way where people feel like they're being told what they can and can't do. So I suppose they'd have to be a bit careful it didn't backfire. I think it's really important to highlight, the well-being benefits, and why we're doing, why they're suggesting the things that they're suggesting. I think it would have to be suggestions rather than. The thing that worries me is we're going to get to the point where they leave it so long that they're going to start saying, you have to do this and you have to do that. It's not, it's not going to be great for any of us.
Liz, the message is getting through. In this week's Sunday Times, it had made a survey of how business leaders are stepping up for the environment, and 80% agreed that they should have policies in place for moral and ethical reasons. 79% said they had a desire to increase organisations' long-term value. 74% said that it aligns with their business strategy. So the message is going through. I just wonder if commerce is just that's lip service, or if they really care.
Do you know what? I think a lot of them do care, and I still work for an organisation. I've still got a day job at the moment, and they don't genuinely do care, and they do have real, quite ambitious targets to meet in terms of carbon reduction, and they do have, departments and stuff working on this. And I think it comes from a place that they genuinely care. The problem being is when companies' main focus is still profit in the short term. Unfortunately, as we've seen too many times, profit comes at the cost of pretty much everything else. And so, even though they can have really good intentions and be working on this stuff and be making a difference, it's, is it going to make enough of a difference quickly enough if they're still focusing on making profit? And that's the main thing they're looking at.
So let's come back to the big question. So the webinar we've got today is about 2030, what's possible. So Liz, from what we've talked about already, or anything else you want to put on the table, what do you see as really what's being possible, what is possible for 2030 in this area of what individuals can do?
I think there's huge opportunity, because it's all these trends. The reason that I put this movement together is because I've seen kind of piecing the puzzle pieces together that things are all moving in this direction anyway. So conscious consumerism, I was reading is one a really massively growing trend, one of the biggest trends. People are starting to wake up and become more conscious and realise that actually well-being is being impacted today from being, too focused on consumerism, and how it's going to affect us all tomorrow as a society, and how we do need to focus not just on the wrong goals like GDP, but actually on our overall well-being and planetary health. And I think all these things are coming together anyway, so any initiatives like the consumer-led movement and others that are going on around the world, and that they are starting to join up as well. I've seen how these initiatives are all aligning, and it's an alliance. Obviously there's no competition here. It's all about how can we all join up, and how can we, the consumer-led movement is going to appeal to a certain group of people, and some other initiatives out there appeal to other people. How do we join all this up? And that is happening anyway. So anything we can do to speed it up, get involved. And if we create enough momentum, I think 2030 could look very, very different.
Liz, I hope we haven't made you too uncomfortable, but I'm dying to ask: is the baby coming soon?
May.
That's round the corner.
12 and a bit weeks. Yeah, not too far now.
Round the corner, round the corner.
Yeah.
And before you leave us, and you've been so, I'm sorry if you've been uncomfortable half an hour. Has it been an uncomfortable half an hour for you?
No, all good. Thank you for
You're a delight. You're a delight to interview. So lovely. So for that baby, what would you wish for it to the world that it comes into? What drastic changes would you like to see for that baby, your baby?
I just would like everyone to be open-minded that actually we can create something better. We do have power as individuals, and we have more and more platforms now. You guys are talking about Clubhouse. We have more and more platforms now where people obviously want to be engaged. They obviously want to do something. They want to have an impact. Just more and more people jumping on that, being open-minded about the sort of future we can create, and realising that we have the power to create it with what we do and what we buy.
That's right.
Wow, that's fantastic.